Hi guys, so I want to talk about how we add labor charges to prices of floral arrangements. And I wanted to do this separately just because I didn't want the first video to get too long. So we're going to talk about labor. I'm going to use the whiteboard a little bit because we're going to do a tiny bit of math. So we discussed in the first video that the labor charges are really an important part of how a florist earns living, keeps the shop busy, keeps the shop profitable, and is able to stay in business. Charging for labor isn't just paying your employees their hourly wage, and you don't factor labor on a floral design based on how many minutes your employee worked. So say I had an employee who was working on a corsage, a wrist corsage for the prom, and I was paying that employee $15 an hour. Chances are she could make that wrist corsage for the prom, if she's a highly skilled worker, in about 15 minutes. That doesn't mean I'm going to charge that 15 minutes of her time. That means I'm going to charge 20% of the total cost of the project. So if I charge $20, $25 for the wrist corsage, I would have an additional $5 added to the price of the arrangement for labor. She worked for 15 minutes, so it's a little bit more. And that when you have a more expensive item, it can get even more significantly different. So my $15 an hour worker, if she puts a vase arrangement together in 15 minutes and it's loaded with roses and peonies and all kinds of stuff like that, and the arrangement itself is worth over $100, that 20% in that 15 minutes that it took her to put together could be an extra $20. So you can see how the labor charge isn't calculated based on how long the employee works on the project. It's factored on how much the project costs, and then the 20% is added on to that. So an important thing that I want to talk about, though, before we actually get into doing math with the two pricing strategies, is about when you add that 20% of labor charges. So let's just think about the price point design. Is when we start with a number of how much the customer is going to spend. Say it's $30. So we're going to take the labor charges, the 20%, we're always going to take it off the highest total number. So with price point design, we know the customer is going to have a $30 arrangement. So the first thing we're going to do is take 20% off the top. We're going to minus that $6, which is 20%. And now we're going to use $24 to come up with supplies and flowers and all the other things that are going to go into the arrangement. So we're going to take that 20% labor off the highest number. With price point, that highest number, that highest dollar figure comes first. Okay? So before we do anything else, we're going to take out the labor charge. With design concept, remember, the customer doesn't have a specific price in mind. The customer wants certain things put together. They want it to look like this, or use these flowers, or be in this container. So with design concept, you're going to add all those things together. That's when you're going to come up with your largest number. Because maybe it's $10 for peonies, and $30 for roses, and $40 for a beautiful container. So now you're up at $80. You're going to wait until you get to the biggest number. So you're going to add everything together. To get the highest number possible, you want your labor off the highest dollar figure that you're going to get. And then you add 20% to that. And that becomes your total. So it's just something to remember as we go into these two kinds of pricing strategies. With price point, The number is bigger at the beginning. The dollar figure is bigger at the beginning, so you take 20% off that. That's your labor charge. With design concept, the large dollar figure doesn't come till the very end when you've added all the pieces together, and then you're going to take your 20% off. So this is just something to keep in mind as we get started with this. And let's talk about how we factor our 20%. People have lots of different ways that they can do math. You can use your calculator and figure out your 20% on your calculator. Some people are really good with mental math. My personal trick is I take a number like 100 and I do 10% is 10, so 20% is 20. Just double those first two numbers. That's what works for me. You can use your calculator. You could multiply 100 times 0.20, and that's going to give you your $20 for your 20%. So whatever way that 20% calculation works for you, different people have different tricks, and I always like to hear how people use their mental math. So chances are most of you will be using your calculators on your phone. When I first started teaching this class, I used to actually have to pass calculators out to everybody because nobody had a cell phone in their pocket. And today you have your cell phone calculator handy with you all the time. So that's how you factor in labor. I just wanted to touch on that first before we went on to actually doing our different pricing strategies.